Okay, we're recording.
Hi everyone. So, how has your week been?
Here we are. Oh,
Yeah.
hold on. Just a second. Is Barin? No, it dropped. Very busy week. I have a pattern now where I work very hard with the AI, and then roughly on Tuesday, I'm running out of weekly credits. And then
Okay.
Wednesday and Thursday, I just, have to be very, very slow and very careful with my credits until the new weekly allotment comes on Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
So right now I'm kind of stuck. My Anthropic, hold on. Oh, Bar's doing a reset. My Anthropic credits are gone. So
Mhm.
I'm using OpenAI very slowly because I don't have as much credits on OpenAI
Okay.
and waiting until tomorrow afternoon when I'll be able to resume work.
Are you on the highest level as far as like credits or
With Anthropic, yes. With Anthropic, I'm on the like $200 a month program.
Okay.
OpenAI, I'm only on the $20 a month. But Anthropic, I'm on the 200, and that's supposed to give me like 20 times as much as many credits as the people on the 20, and it's much cheaper than the equivalent in buying tokens at their sort of list price. So there
Okay.
is a price for every model where you can buy as many tokens as you want, but that adds up very, very quickly. So
Right.
probably I would have paid like $1,000 a month if I was using that in the same volume that I'm using now instead of the 200.
Okay.
But the nice thing about the 200, oh, here's Bar. Hold on, let me accept him. Hello,
Hey Bar.
Bar.
Yes.
I have a message here that your storage is critically low and your recording upload may be at risk, just so that you know. No, no, it's Bar. It's only on Bar's side.
I can hear.
You can hear, but are you using phone or are you using your
Computer,
computer?
why? What's wrong?
Echo.
There was an echo while you were silenced?
I'm talking to you now,
Now there's an echo.
and I can hear myself.
It sounded good earlier, so the too bad.
Yes, earlier it sounded good, so I'm not sure what happened.
It collapsed my Linux. Sometimes the internet doesn't work well, so I moved to the Windows, and in the Windows I think it's probably not as good. I
I
could
see.
try again on the Linux if you'd like, but for now I'm silencing myself whenever you talk.
Okay,
I
we
okay.
can go with that.
Sure, yeah. It does make the conversation a little difficult, so in general I if you can that it's preferable to go for the Linux. Dad, you were saying would you have be willing to pay more for even more credits?
No, at the moment I'm probably at the limit of what this is worth. We were just saying, Bar, that I'm paying $200 a month to Anthropic, and even then I run out of compute on Tuesday and have to wait until Thursday afternoon before I can finish my
I was
tasks.
going to talk to you about that because I just saw a few videos about how there's a huge compute shortage and the prices have to go up right now for everybody. I guess that the most generous would be Gemini. I think that Google is still subsidizing, so if you move there, it'll probably be cheaper but not as good quality. I'm gonna restart my computer. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
So Gemini, by the way, is absolutely no good for coding.
Oh, okay.
Coding, it's only Anthropic and OpenAI. Anthropic is Claude Code, and OpenAI is something called Codex, and they are like they're head to head. They're very very close in terms of capabilities.
Hmm.
Every 6 weeks, one of them releases a new model that's a little better, and then the next one's releasing another model that's a little better than that. But Google Gemini is fine for day to day, questions,
Hmm.
but for coding, it's not a serious contender.
Okay, and you recently talked about that AI assistant thing. What's it
Agents,
called?
yeah,
No,
agents.
no, like Siri, I guess.
Oh, yes, the Alexa Plus.
Alexa.
Uh,
Okay, yeah.
I'm
Is
not
that's
quite sure how
Alexa.
to
Amazon?
help you with that.
That's funny.
Yeah, right. I muted her, so that's fine.
Okay. So,
I haven't really used it much. I
okay.
bought a new Echo device. It's on a different account because I'm all of my devices are on a business account, and Alexa Plus is only available on a personal account. And then, like, we unplugged it because we needed to plug something else and we haven't decided where it goes. So I haven't really been using it for the last couple of weeks, but it should be interesting to try it again.
Yeah, I was recently thinking about it because I would be interested in hearing about your experience with it, because I do find myself, little questions here and there, chemistry of something that I'm cooking about, or like just the weather in a different location or time, and like stuff like that. I would be convenient to talk to the agent rather than type it in.
Uh-huh. Yes. So you should definitely give it a go. I don't think it's if you have do you have Amazon Prime?
I don't think so. I'm very cheap.
Okay.
I'm very
Okay.
frugal. Grandma asked me to stop saying cheap, so.
Well, it pays for itself if you order more than, if you're paying, you can work out how much you're paying in shipping cost, and it might pay for itself depending on how much you buy from Amazon. I mean, I
So,
buy from Amazon
yeah.
all the time, so yeah.
Right, yeah. So because we try not to spend very much, so we don't order too much on Amazon either. But we every once in a while, we do order from there. We do find that like as a big competitor to Amazon, if so long as you live in the U.S., Walmart does actually a really good job. It's
Yes.
also a mass distributor like them, and they're surprisingly cheap and good, and they have much more availability, because a lot of people just think of the box stores or like the supermarkets, but the online retail aspect of it is actually much bigger than like I realized. And
I
they have
actually saw a video
cheap
very
packages.
recently that compared Amazon and Walmart. And the funny thing is that Walmart's physical stores have a bad reputation amongst like upper middle class people. So there's some
That's
people
true.
that wouldn't be caught. I loved Walmart when we lived in the
Yes.
US. But on the other hand, their online offering, nobody can see where you're shopping online.
Okay.
And because they have so many stores all over, their distribution is fairly fast. So
Right.
you can get things same day in a way that is difficult with Amazon,
That
especially
makes
if you
sense.
don't live in a. Yeah. Oh, here's Bar again. He's going to be on Windows, so it's going to be painful, and we should really get him to buy a earphones. I mean,
Well, he's currently unemployed, so he told me that once he's employed again, he will gladly get a microphone. But for now,
no. I don't need a fancy microphone, but just cheap earphones that you can probably buy for like 20 shekels in the market.
you're
And
assuming a lot about what Israeli headphones cost.
Yeah, 20 shekels is not very real. 50 shekels is the cheapest possible. Probably I could connect them though. So I'll probably do that. I'm not sure it'll help though.
Yeah.
well, no, earphones definitely will help. But okay, we'll give this a go. Right. Shall we start?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that's all good content. But okay, so actually, just to finish off what we were talking about, I knew a lady
Okay.
in New Hampshire who we ran a restaurant there, and she was a customer of ours at the restaurant, and we saw her at Walmart. We used to buy most of our like stuff for the restaurant at Walmart, so.
Uh-huh.
It ends up being cheaper than any of the big distributors like Cisco, or what's the other one called? US Foods. So it's we saw a lady there, and we were talking about how hey, we saw you at Walmart the other day, and she had this look about her of like kind of looking around and looking embarrassed. So we've definitely experienced that people seem to have a very low regard for Walmart, which is too bad. I mean, I understand it, especially in bigger cities. Since we moved from New Hampshire, we do see a lot more foreigners and lower class people at Walmart. I think it's just about of what people are willing to behave like in any given place. So it's like you see a lot of people coming in their house slippers and pajamas. So
Right.
that's generally considered low class. That's generally considered.
I mean, it's
No,
no
not quite.
Waffle House.
Oh, which reminds me, have you guys heard about Spirit Airlines?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't have any. I just saw the headline, so I don't know any of the details. I mean, presumably it has to do with jet fuel prices.
Okay. So that's
But,
actually you've hit the nail on the head. That is actually an argument going on online. The right is
Uh-huh.
blaming. They were stopped by the Biden administration from merging with the JetBlue a few months back,
Uh-huh.
and
Right.
so the right people are saying this is just the final straw. But generally, they had issues for a long time, and the Biden administration basically created the scenario that would have happened inevitably anyway.
enjoying the failure of the and then people blaming them specifically for blocking the merger and that ruining the company. But basically, COVID kind of really hit the travel industry really hard. And I think
Yeah, and
that
as
people
far
are
as
still
because of
recovering.
their business model, they had very low margins to begin with. So they are on a precarious place, and yes, of course, the recent price increase doesn't help. Though from what I saw, like during under Biden, the oil prices did at some point reach a higher level than they are now. So it's not necessarily even this administration's oil prices. Yeah.
Flight companies that they make all their money from the clubs, their freaking flyer clubs. So the margins are very very thin.
I thought frequent flyers are a cost center, not a profit center. I heard they make their money on selling drinks and the luggage allowances.
Yeah, I heard generally the add-ons, like extra baggage space or things like that.
Because it's low cost until you add all the things that you
Right,
actually
right.
want, and then it's normal cost. And that's how I felt also in Kenya, where everything could be really, really cheap. But if you want to actually have the same thing that you had in the West, it's even marginally more expensive.
That makes sense. On the other hand, I mean, it's what you're willing to sacrifice. And it's nice to have that frugal option. I'm definitely willing to slum it for a frugal option
Yeah,
at this
and
point
I
in
think
life.
that's the important. It's actually a very interesting point that came up when, decades ago when I was first thinking about libertarian economics. What regulations do is they put a floor on how low you can reduce your standard of living. So in the West, because of various regulations, product safety, minimum apartment sizes, all sorts of things, because of various regulations, you cannot actually survive on as little as you can survive in, say, India. Right? If
Right.
it weren't for regulations, then the market would find solutions that would allow people to survive on much less than they do now. And it might not be pretty, but it will be survivable. They certainly wouldn't have to be homeless. They would just have to, share more people share an apartment in a way that is technically illegal at the moment.
Right.
Of regulation, but if you think about, like, for instance, drug regulations, they make the drug trade much more profitable. So you could make your money
On
there.
both ends,
That's
actually, because
yes.
marijuana is much more expensive and, well, other illicit drugs than it would have been if it were perfectly legal. So they make it expensive on both ends. Yeah,
You might have like also appetite suppressants that could save you
that's true.
money on food.
Oh,
Right. Yeah.
the GOP-1 drugs, the fat drugs. Um,
Yes.
so I recently heard there was a big development in one of the main brands. I don't know the details too much, but just thought it was interesting. So a lot of the issue with it was that it burned a lot of fat, but it also burned a lot of mass muscle. And it was
Uh,
an appetite suppressant, so it brought you down in weight from both ends. But a lot of people's muscles were really withering, especially if they didn't exercise while taking them, and that was like the biggest issue with the drug. But some
Eat less. It's also like burns like muscles
right.
as well. Like people who work out while they're cutting, they have to work out really hard just to keep the muscle that they have. And
I
even
mean,
then, they
that makes
lose some.
sense, but from what I understand, that was like the biggest scare about this drug. It's a lot of people didn't want the negative side effect of losing all that muscle. So it was only really realistically logical for people who are obese and have genuine health issues with their weight to go that route. But recent medical like breakthrough, from what I understand, makes it so that they can isolate it, the fat burning to be mostly fat burning and affect less of the muscle.
In this. But did you guys realize that protein folding
Yes.
has
Well, a
been
while
solved?
back, AlphaFold did it like it's years ago now. It's a Nobel Prize for it. It's been a while now, as far as I know.
I would expect that now the ventures that are based on this, they would start starting up right now. Although the problem is that passing FDA approval takes like 15 years. But if we can like hope that Maha does something to reduce the regulations, maybe we can still have time to save
I
grandma.
definitely am hopeful that we'll be able to save grandma in time. I think, yeah. No,
I
I
did.
mean, over the last few years, I was just going to say that over the last few years, I got optimistic that we'll achieve, we call it longevity, launch velocity in my lifetime. And over the last couple of years, I'm starting to hope that maybe even in your grandparents' lifetime.
Right.
I think it would. I'm really. It really sucks to die. I don't like dying. But it would be much worse to be like the last person who ever dies.
Well, there's good and bad to everything, including dying. But living longer would be nice. As soon as you start, what's a good age? I mean, it's like if I reach 200, I'll suddenly feel like 500 would be better. And once I reach 500, I'm sure I'll think of 1,000. So it's hard to say, but you do need that contrast, I think.
I just don't want to be the last one who dies. If as long as there's like 50 years after I die that people still die, then I don't feel like, oh, if I just worked out a little bit more and ate a little bit healthier, then I would.
Yeah, I think barring an accident, there's no reason for either one of you to die, and hopefully not me either. I
Well,
just
that
cannot
greatly reduces
conceive
my
of
chances.
I just cannot conceive of a situation where in 20 years, given the exponential rate of advancement, in 20 years, sort of longevity is not going to be resolved. I think it's
Is greatly increased government regulation.
Government regulation can only exist when it is affordable for the people who really make decisions in society. Government regulation that will stop, senators and presidents from living is not going to last long.
Children's blood
Exactly.
is secret. They just
Exactly.
Don't tell you.
But I think they're not going to be able to keep the true, more scientific elixir of life secret. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I always thought it was weird that it's so difficult to develop a drug that will help people diet, because metabolism is a relatively simple process, like compared to how the brain works, for instance. And there is so much money in it. There's like virtually infinite amount of money in helping people get thin safely. And hopefully we're on the cusp of cheap, safe, effective diet drugs. I think that's about to I think we're in the process.
I don't see why we are there. There is cheap safe. I don't know if it's cheap. Actually.
It's cheaper
But
than it
it's
was.
safe
I
and
mean, it's
effective.
cheap relatively to the amount of benefit you get from it. I am a little interested in the societal effects of. I mean, it kind of stops being a status marker, right? Because what made it a status marker is that you had enough free time, you had enough ability to maintain your health, and you had enough willpower to maintain your health. I wonder to what extent will it be. What effects will have on society if it really becomes very easy and without too many side effects?
Well,
But I still I did my psychometric exam without a course. If you don't know, that's my failing because I try to say it all the time.
Both life extension and humanoid robots should help with that.
Right.
Replace us, or in this instance,
I don't think it's about maintaining the government. It's more about we're living in a very, very, very specialized and complex ecosystem of economic exchange. And if you don't have enough people to maintain it, then it starts collapsing in on itself because one sector can't function. And then because of how everything is so interconnected, it affects all the other elements of the economy and it could be a very serious collapse. So in that sense, robotics will help. And the standard of living will go up, especially if there's less people to fight over the resources because of the demographic collapse. So I don't see an issue with that. My issue would be cultural collapse in the sense, like, part of the reason. Okay, so this is actually a topic I wanted to discuss with you guys. So there's a lot of people around, like, Zoomers and millennials complain about the standard of living. And a lot of it, you find a lot of like older people, generally Gen Xers and boomers, talking about how that's a silly complaint because the standard of living is actually much higher. And it's true that, as I looked it up recently, and I think utilities, for instance, are like 30% lower for now than they were in like 1980s. But housing is like 40 or 50% high. Yeah, something like even 100, oh, close to 100% higher actually. So there's elements that are cheaper and there are elements that are more expensive. Housing is a very specific case because it's become a way to escape inflation. But generally, the standard of living has supposedly gone up. So people say, like, why is the younger generation complaining and they're just lazy? But I do think a lot of the issue is not economic standard of living collapsing, but rather social standard of living. So this is the message I sent the other day about. I can look it up. But anyways, I think a lot of the issues that we're having is because human beings are like mimicking animals. And if we don't have a standard of morality and social norms to mimic, because everything is permitted and we're like socially liberal, then there is no right and wrong, and we don't know where to go and what to do and what is fulfilling and what isn't fulfilling. And standards of right and wrong exist to help society stay stable, because we want a high trust society that's easier to maintain. But it's also internal in the sense that you feel better if you are striving towards an admirable goal and getting closer to achieving it. So that's what actually makes human beings happy. And so long as there's no standard of what's admirable and there's no standards of trying to achieve goals, human beings become extremely depressed and nihilistic. And everything is nihilistic and depressing now. And I think that's mainly the issue young people are facing, but they don't have the words for it. So they blame housing costs when not knowing that the issue is that, like, they don't have who to live with, as far as like family, for instance, which is like the main achievable, most fulfilling goal that any human being should strive for. Okay.
I'd like to, first of all, I wasn't there for the 80s, so maybe you're right. But I was there before 2008, and before 2008, life was much financially easier than it is now. I think that maybe it's overstated, and you're probably right that there is probably a big spiritual crisis. Also, a lot of it is because social media, people see people living huge lifestyles and they feel like it's not fair. They should be doing better themselves, but they can't. And so, like, living on a budget becomes not an option. But I sincerely doubt that the thing with the financial situation being better than ever isn't some like numbers game that economists in the government like to play.
No, there's certainly an element of truth in that sense, because things that are more sustainable for life, like housing, is more important than flat screen TVs, and flat screen TVs are the classic, they're cheaper now than they've ever been kind of thing. And it is true that people are making less now than before COVID. I think the big jump was COVID, actually. You're right. No, 2008 was also a big jump, actually. But maybe, it's easier for me. It's always easier to feel good if your comparative situation is better. And I don't do social media much, so I don't really see what rich people are doing. So in that sense, I'm not really comparing myself to them. And also, I'm in America now versus Israel, which is one of the many shithole countries, no offense. So comparatively, I'm much richer.
Moving back to America, and I keep talking to my wife about how it'll be fine in America. In Israel, the financial situation is really rough, but in America, it's going to be much better. But she keeps insisting, no, it's not what you remember. It's getting worse there. All my friends from America say it. I hope she's wrong. I remember it being much easier than Israel. But yeah, it's even if it is, it definitely is better than Israel, because everywhere is better than Israel. But even if it's bad, it shouldn't be getting worse. It's been getting worse, I think, steadily since 2008. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit of culture degradation, and that's definitely occurring. But I'm pretty sure financial degradation also.
So
go ahead.
One contribution I wanted to make is, a while ago, it was very fashionable for people on the left to complain about inequality. And there were books about how inequality is bad for society. It's not just bad for the poor, it's bad for the rich as well. And the libertarian perspective and my perspective is always that inequality shouldn't be an issue. The issue should be poverty. So if you have people who are very poor, that's a problem for society, and society should solve it, ideally, obviously, on involuntary ways. But very poor people is something that we, as a society, want to try to eliminate. Inequality, on the other hand, shouldn't be a problem. And I mean, the evidence is that there are obviously people that are much much wealthier than me, and frankly, I couldn't care less. So I don't really care that some people, spends hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on something trivial, because or as long as the money is not coming out of my pocket, and if that makes them happy, and if they got their money fair and square, so what do I care? I think you're right that social media makes it much more visible what the lifestyle of the rich and famous is a favorite object of interest to all members of society. I'm now thinking out loud, and I'd be curious to see what you guys think. How does that compare to older times, to Victorian times, or even medieval times? Didn't the poor people know that the king and the aristocracy lived in much, much better situation than them? Is that the visibility on the gap in the standard of living? Is that a new thing, or has that always been the case?
Okay, so two things.
One thing there, I admire your ability to mind your own business in the way that, oh, this guy can just waste, he can spend money on whatever he wants, it's not affecting me. But that's not how people work. Most people get jealous. Their envy is a very powerful tool, and I'm a competitive guy, okay? I'm fine with being poor as long as everybody else is poor. But if somebody else is rich and I'm poor, that means that I'm doing something wrong, or something is wrong with this society, and I have to fix it right now. Um, Regarding what you said about how things were in the past there was a much clearer class structure. It means that you knew your place in society. You knew that you were poor and the rich people were rich, but that's fine because you're a poor soul. You're supposed to be poor, and the rich are supposed to be rich because that's how God determined it. But right now, with our current worldview, I feel like I should be equal to these guys. In fact, I'm better than these guys. Why are they more successful than me? Something is wrong with me.
That's actually that's actually the points I was going to make, and very well put because it was put in such a normal person perspective. It's true. Even that statement, the last one, is so accurate. Of like, I'm better than them.
Now you see why I'm supposed to be the rich one.
Even that, so that last statement of I'm better than them, and therefore why are they successful while I'm not, is incredibly accurate, especially for people who are midwits, because they are somewhat socially aware that they're more intelligent than the average, but they're not quite as intelligent as like an Elon Musk, and they call him an idiot, which is funny, of course. But
Elon Musk are
right,
so
right.
stupid. I'm much smarter than him.
But I will get back to, okay, so Dad, I know, well, again, a lot of libertarians are autistic. So I do think a lot of their worldview, it comes from that. Or the reason why it attracts autistic people is because the libertarian worldview is autistic. So there's a misunderstanding of social structure, and I think a lot of the issue with libertarianism is exactly this tragedy of the commons kind of situation that it creates. So social structure requires an action. So like a lot of people coming together and doing actions together because individuals just don't have the power as much as collectives do. Ideally, you'd want it to come from your peers rather than from your superiors. And so public pressure would be more social ostracized based and standards of norms and honor. And so long as you don't have a cohesive society with people all having the same standards, so the same cultural norms and the same feelings towards each other and the community, then you would need an overarching high authority to maintain the order, which obviously I think so. I think there's like contradiction between your willingness to import a lot of foreigners who have different cultural norms and senses of society, and you're all at the same time wanting smaller government. But I will say about the willingness to live happily, so long, regardless of what other people have or achieve. That is a very you thing, and people do compare on constantly. Do you know that social experiment of like, if you could take, we could take $10, right? And then the first person decides how it's split, and then the second person decides whether or not to take that deal. So you know that if it's not split, okay, first of all, what would you do? Say, if I were to split if I were the first person, then I would split 9 to 1. You would get $1, and I would get $9. Would you agree to that deal?
That's an interesting question, and it's much too context specific to answer. In particular, the likelihood of this game repeating, whether the amount is meaningful or symbolic, whether I know you or not, and what mood I was in the morning. So it depends on a lot of things, and it's difficult to answer. But I'm familiar with this, and jealousy and the sense of justice are innate human emotions, and I'm not ignoring them. It's not that I'm not aware that they exist in other people. Some aspects might be weaker in some people than in others. And by the way, I completely disagree with you about like immigration versus government size. How would you compare the size of government, let's say today, and the size of government in the late 19th and early 20th century, when there were huge waves of immigration of people with very different cultures, yet much smaller government, and they integrated, and in retrospect, Americans are very happy about them.
Okay, one second. I think there's, okay, first of all, yes, it was much smaller then, and government needs to grow like slowly over time. And I think part of the reason why it grew since then is because of those waves of immigration. But beyond that, the immigration back then, if I'm not mistaken, was more European, wasn't it?
Whoa, when you say Europe, it's easy today to say European and think of it as, European culture versus non-European. It was not Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
No,
A
no,
lot
of
of them
course.
people came from Southern Europe, and some of them came from Eastern Europe. And I'm
Sure.
not even mentioning the Irish. So when you
No,
say
no.
European, you're saying European with a 21st century lens. You know that.
Or like even Italian, for instance, which are considered
Yeah.
white, but not really. So no,
The main, what I add that maybe the main issue isn't whether the immigrants are European, but to what degree the immigrants are forced to assimilate.
Very.
Back then,
Well,
we were very forced to assimilate.
Hold on. In what
Whereas
sense are
today, you're not
you
really.
know about, think about New York and Jewish immigration in the early 20th century, and whole neighborhoods where people spoke Yiddish and they had Yiddish theater and so on. In the middle Upper West, you had whole cities that spoke German. The need to assimilate wasn't any greater then than it is now, I don't think.
Okay, so as far as I'm aware, they literally broke. Okay, so for instance, the Germans wanted to have German-speaking schools, and the government literally interfered and stopped them from creating those schools. Not to mention, no Irish need apply, and other social pressures from the surrounding area that are illegal now, but back then were perfectly legitimate ways to make sure that this group of people act in a standard that we are willing to accept before we are willing to accept individuals from that group.
Maybe one of you know, is there a significant population in the United States of people that were born in the US and don't speak English?
Okay, so that's actually really interesting. I do think it is significantly more now. Let me Spanish, because especially in the food industry, I don't know, like if you've ever seen this, because I don't know if you would like be in the position to see it. But I work in kitchens, and every single product that we receive, and every single box that we receive, and every single form that I need to sign for legal reasons is in English and in Spanish.
But that doesn't distinguish between people who just immigrated and don't speak English versus people who were born in the country and don't speak English.
I've personally met people who recently that were born in the US and don't speak English like very well, if at all. But you know what? Let's look that up actually. Bart, do you have any opinion? I don't know if you've ever seen any stats on this or anything.
I don't have really. I mean, my most recently, I lived in New Hampshire, and I
No, of
didn't
course
feel
not.
like anybody was out of place there. What bothered me more was like the feeling of a little bit, social degradation, as we mentioned. That was what I was reminded of when Dad talked about the Jewish community coming in droves and speaking Yiddish, or the Germans speaking German. And the thing about that is that, first of all, when I said assimilate, I meant like financially assimilate, like they have to pull their weight. And on the other hand, it also means that they have a community, a ready-made community. They aren't like atomized, like modern people or modern immigrants. Well, it's actually, the problem is the modern locals. Okay, when you see all the Somalis in Wisconsin, you're not thinking, oh, they're not. You're thinking they aren't assimilating with my culture, but they're not feeling the same alienation that you are. You're just looking at that and thinking, oh, they have this thing, and I want that thing also. So I'm a little bit resentful, but that's not mentioning all the fraud and things like that, which obviously
Okay,
would be
so I just
yeah.
asked ChatGPT, and it says that about 2% of US-born people are not proficient in English. So there isn't a huge problem of native-born Americans who are not proficient in English. That's a small minority. What you're seeing in terms of like bilingual signs and so on are people who immigrated into the country and don't speak English, and that has always been an issue. It's always been an issue in every country where you have immigration. And by the way, I
That's
don't
just
think
it.
that immigrants.
That's where you have immigration. So it is an issue related to immigration. The
No,
fact
no,
that they're not born there.
well, of course, but it has to do with the question of assimilation. Assimilation is a multi-generational thing.
Of
And my
course.
point is that I don't think immigration population today, when judged on a multi-generational scale, are less likely to assimilate than those that immigrated 150 to 125 years ago.
You really think, okay, considering the advancements in technology and the large percentage of people of the same population that immigrate at the same time, and
Uh-huh.
the large cultural differences, and it's true that, back then, the cultural differences between, a Frenchman and an Englishman were considered much greater. But now, comparatively, we all think of ourselves as Europeans because the differences are so much greater with other cultures. So, considering all that, do you really think it's easier to assimilate today, or as easy as it was in like the 19th century?
Well, I think it's a lot easier today. It's a lot
Okay.
easier for multiple reasons. Technology helps. For instance, communication. You can see, you can watch English language television with Spanish subtitles and learn the language that way.
Why would you?
Sorry?
Why would you?
Why?
You have your Spanish neighbors and your Spanish deli and your Spanish
Oh,
butcher
oh.
and your
No,
Spanish
no,
family.
that's a separate question.
Easier to assimilate these
Okay, so
days.
that's a
It's
separate
also
question.
easier to
Exactly,
not
Bob.
assimilate.
So you ask whether it's easier to assimilate. Then there's a question of about the motivation to assimilate. And my point was that you could get along without speaking English in the early 20th century as well, as long as you lived amongst your kin. And today people live amongst their kin, and that's fine. But the evidence that I brought up is that the next generation does speak English. And the reason they speak English is very clear. Why should they assimilate? Because you can get much higher, you have many more doors open to you when you speak English than when you don't. If you are just a poor farmer that just came into the country and all you can do is pick strawberries, then speaking English is not a big deal, especially if a lot of people around you don't. But if you're the child of that person who wants to go to university and have a white collar job, then not speaking English is a huge problem. And the evidence is that they do speak English.
I don't know if that. Well, I think you'll need to see it bear out over time. But
Mhm.
I will say that so long as immigration continues and you get a fresh population of new people, then you don't have time to assimilate because you just keep getting an influx of your kin. And so these industries, like these demographics start to diverge and become like mini societies. So, like there is it's going to inevitably create a fracturing of the cohesive culture of America if you allow different cultures to create their like little enclaves, so like little Chinatowns or like the Muslim cities that they're like trying to build in Texas.
Well,
I know what Dad will respond, and he's probably right. The the issue isn't linear. In 1875, immigrants were much. It was much easier to receive immigrants, even if they have trouble assimilating. The Civil War just ended, and we were in the middle of the Gilded Age, and economic the economy was growing. The same after World War II. Lots of immigrants come, but it's fine because we have a strong local culture and a cohesive identity of who we are. So having foreigners isn't bothering us. Right now, we're in the midst of a degradation. We have an identity crisis, and you're bringing in lots of foreigners. It's just confusing the whole thing and creating them and setting them up to be
okay, I don't accept any of that, but we're starting to get into factual questions
Hold on.
you know,
Just
how
1 second.
cohesive.
You don't accept that people are currently using the immigrants as scapegoats.
Sorry, people currently use immigration as a scapegoat. Yes, they always did, and they do today as well. They did in the 19th century, they did in the 20th century, and they do now.
Even if they're wrong, that means that immigration becomes a social issue, doesn't it?
Immigration has always been and will always be a social issue. Yes.
No, not well. It is so long as you continue to have immigration.
Yes. Actually, in Japan, it's also a social issue.
So, no. My point is not that immigration doesn't bring challenges with it, right? My point is that those challenges are not new, and the issues that we currently have with immigration are very similar to the issues that the United States has always had with immigration and always overcame, despite the immigration.
I don't know if I think the cultures. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that there is difference between cultures, and some cultures are better than other, and some cultures are higher trust, and some cultures are lower trust. And it seems like, I don't know if you saw this, but Trump recently like tweeted or something, proofed, yes, this stat of like the immigration from which country and the amount they contribute versus take from government benefits.
Do you know why? Why was it that the signs of Irish need not apply came up in the 19th century?
Because their behavior was not appropriate for the workplace. They would fight and they would drink, and they were, as far as I know, also smelly. And
whereas immigration from Latin America, immigrants tend to be very hardworking. So you're saying that the cultural differences between the Irish in the 19th century and the domestic English population have been wider, even despite a common language. The cultural differences were wider than they are now between a society that's already fairly mixed with African Americans and native-born Hispanics and so on, and the new Hispanics that come in and all they want to do is mow your lawn and be left alone and you know.
Okay, so first of all, you're very benevolent towards the Spanish people. I don't even have an issue with them. It's not even in that sense. I don't even think their culture is so as different, for instance, as like Muslim culture and the issues that Europe has with immigration. So in that sense, I do think we have it easier. But first of all, what another element of it is that we need to take into consideration is the size of government. So, for instance, back then you could say no Irish need apply, and that would have an effect on their behavior because there's a certain incentive involved. But you couldn't do something like that today. That would be illegal.
Rights Act kind of ruins your ability to freely associate. But also, I wanted to add that the reality is that Irish people, like but they haven't really assimilated. There are still Irish people who are Irish and acting Irish. There are still German people who are German and acting German. And now the what's it called? The Anglo-Saxon Protestants, they're becoming less and less of a majority, and it's kind of ruining the whole project.
That's very true. Although to say that, I mean, and certainly there are Jews that haven't assimilated, but let's not go in there. With respect to. Yes, go ahead.
No, it's just that I am interested in going there, but continue with your
Right. No, I was hoping to say something because I kind of lost my
train of thought.
my train of thought. I think in terms of cultural differences. Oh, yes, I know what it is. The size of government. Right. So I agree with you that government is too large, and government being too large makes problems in a lot of areas, including immigration, but not limited to immigration. If you believe, and we can go back to that veracity of that point of view, but if you believe that immigration plus government plus large government is problematic, right? The next question you ask yourself is, what do we do about it? And the suggestion that the only thing we can do, or the best thing we can do, is limit immigration, misses the point. What we should do is we should advocate for smaller government, especially when it comes to benefits to immigrants and the ability and the right to free association. So it is illegal to exclude people because of their national origin right now, but it's also illegal to, well, I don't know, to stop asylum seekers from making their claims at the border. I'm sure that with the determination that the Trump administration showed to, flexing immigration laws in a way that will stop the flow of immigration, it could very easily also stop the flow of funds to illegal immigrants. It should be a lot easier for the government to stop paying illegal immigrants than it is to stop them from coming into the country.
We get back to
Exactly.
the
Yeah. So
coalition
there is
politics
an
thing.
element that is too okay. So a lot of people call libertarians utopian, and I think that comes from this lack of understanding of the realpolitik on the ground kind of thing. So it's nice to say we all want smaller government, and I think I do think actually most people would agree who aren't getting currently money from the government, which is over 40% apparently of the current American people are like in some ways getting government money. So it is becoming bigger and bigger and therefore harder and harder to dismiss. But even something that like 40% of the people would riot over is way too big of an issue to deal with. So an easier way is to make sure that your demographic is the type of the people who are culturally more inclined towards a smaller government. And the easiest way to do that is not to make government smaller because that's an impossible task politically, but rather to get rid of them using big government. And then once you have a culturally cohesive society that can discuss these other matters, it's much easier to take action in that way.
Do you think the population of do you think the current population of American citizens or native born Americans is culturally cohesive?
Much less than they were.
Sorry?
Much less than they were, certainly, but much more than they are with banana and rice eaters.
Banana and rice eaters.
It's a joke. It's Somalis.
Well, I don't.
Is banana
But
and
some of
rice.
it is
Some
not
of it
rice
is
and
rice
bananas.
bananas.
Other parts of it is, rice and bananas.
Let's ask a different. Let me try a different perspective on this question. Right? We talked about envy and how inequality is a problem because people are envious about how the rich people live, even though rich people don't really mix with the rest of us. Right?
That's
It's
actually
not as if.
okay.
Yeah.
It's just
So
go ahead. Yeah, finish up.
But let me finish up. But the point is, you know about them. And with immigration, people have legitimate sounding concerns about immigration. But it stands to reason that the closer you live to large immigrant population, the more those immigrant population will impact your life on a day-to-day basis. And if that is the case, then there should have been a positive correlation between the size of the immigrant population on the one hand and the attitude of the native population towards immigrants on the other. What should have happened, we should find, is that states and counties and cities with a large immigrant population will have more anti-immigrant sentiment amongst the native born than places with a low immigrant population. But I think empirically the opposite is the case.
Okay.
Do you agree? And if so, how do you explain that?
I disagree. Okay, so the issue isn't that. Okay, So there's a lot of elements related to whether or not you're interested in a larger immigrant population. But a lot of it is how insulated are you from the effects of it. So areas that have initially had right-leaning tendencies and got a larger immigration did have a bigger issue with immigration, as shown by statistics related to people who are pro or against immigration based off of states that were closer to the border or further away from the border. But people who are more naturally, culturally indoctrinated to be pro-immigration, and they were also, as far as I am aware, like it's been a while since I saw these statistics, but they were also against immigration more than they used to be, the cities on the border were, compared to the cities that were more inland and were less affected by immigration. So the closer you were to the border, the more you were against immigration, if you were right and if you were left. But left-leaning people are more open to immigration regardless of where they are.
That's an interesting empirical question.
I have
Yeah.
an addition to that. In the direction of causation, you're saying, oh, they have more immigrants, so they should be suffering from, they should hate immigrants more. But the causation goes the other way. The people who don't like immigrants work hard immigrants, and they
Well, maybe. But I'm thinking more sort of open, sort of Midwestern or Western open areas, your Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, Alaska kind of states tend to be Republican, anti-immigrant, but have very few immigrants, and not because they stop immigrants from coming, but just because immigrants don't want to go there. Contrast that with California and New York, that have a lot of immigrants, but still are not as anti-immigrant. And then you have Texas, that is right wing and also has a lot of immigrants. So we have a lot of mixture. But I think what I want to propose is that right wing populations in the United States are being indoctrinated to be anti-immigrant, that their anti-immigrant sentiments are not based on their day-to-day experience, but rather on what they hear from people they trust about the underlying cause of their problems.
I would like to extend that. Right wingers don't hate immigrants at all. They hate leftists. Leftists love immigrants.
So there's an element of truth to that, but I will say that I, as someone who deals with immigrants, because that's like a huge part of the industry, I am actively affected with a lower standard of living because they're of immigration. I cannot communicate with my coworkers, and there are racial-based conflicts within my workplace because of immigration. I've worked in kitchens that are higher-end kitchens, which is to say, require higher levels of entry from their employees, and therefore it's less likely that you'll find immigrants in them. And they were more cohesive, and there was a group dynamic that was more jovial and friendly and towards group growth, versus kitchens where there's a lot of immigration and the rule order.
Can you mute? All right. So I'll go back to you with the questions that libertarians would normally pose. It sounds to me, wear the hat not of of an employee in a kitchen, but of the restaurant owner. Okay. Mm-hmm. As a restaurant owner, it sounds like you would prefer to have a sort of culturally cohesive kitchen. B, high-end restaurants are able to maintain a kitchen like that. So it's not that like the regulations prohibit you from having English speakers in your kitchen. And yet C, lower-end restaurants do hire non-English speakers, despite the fact that everybody knows it's not as good for the kitchen. And then you ask yourself, why do they do that?
Okay,
and the answer is obviously because they are cheaper.
Okay, so yes, that is the answer. It's because they are cheaper. It's also because they're much more available. So at current market rates, you can't find a lot of native-born people who are willing to do this sort of labor. But the prices of this sort of job would go up naturally if there was more competition for that same position. So a flooding of immigrants into the system makes it necessary or makes it necessary for everyone to have immigrants as your workers, and it's an industry with very low margins. What's interesting about higher end restaurants is that they have better margins. And another element that I think a lot of people don't take into consideration when they talk about the free market is 80% of anything is bad. Okay? So 80% of restaurants are just bad. They're bad restaurants. They're bad in the sense that customers don't enjoy them as much as well-run restaurants, and they will fail within a few years. Everyone knows that about any business, but 80% of the people, like 20% of the people do 80% of the job or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's similar with any industry. And with an industry that has such a high turnover rate, especially restaurants, you can see that a lot as well. So you might make a decision today. There's this marketing guy who's very well respected in the marketing field called Rory Sutherland. He's British. I really recommend watching his videos. He's really got some very interesting insights. So a lot of times people make short-end decisions because of these bottom line profits without considering the long end boom that you would get from something that's less intuitive. So a lot of times why companies like Chick-fil-A, for instance, Chick-fil-A is an interesting example because it's a family-owned business and it's consistently been more successful than its comparative counterparts because they care more about little details in the way that more corporate something becomes, the less they care about these things. And it might be more profitable for their bottom line initially, but over time they gain this reputation of being the type of place that you don't want to go to. So these sorts of things take a long time to take effect, and there are second order consequences that you don't see initially. The businesses that do manage to maintain a higher standard of work or labor do end up faring better, but it's something that you would have to wait out the competition over time. And there are market incentives that are pushing you towards hiring these lower wage workers because you have to compete with your neighbor who is also hiring lower wage workers. So you might say that, yes, they're hiring lower wage workers, but they'd like to not if they could. It's just that they have to compete under these circumstances. So, for instance, another popular example that you would agree with is that I don't want to lobby the government, but my competitor is lobbying the government. So if I don't lobby the government, I'm going to lose. Now, we both lose because now every company is lobbying the government and making more and more regulations over time. So all of society is losing. But I have to do it now because otherwise my business would fail because my competitor is doing the bad thing as well. Just because something is bad and that I have to do it because of market forces doesn't mean it's not over time bad for the market.
Well, what you're saying now, the line of argument that you're making is precisely, it goes back to what we started talking about, which is how regulations tend to make life more expensive. They put a floor on the cost of things. What you're saying now is precisely the line that is used by government regulators everywhere to weed out cheaper, but in some sense, not as good a product. Right? I can't allow you to live in a small apartment. You might want to, you might think you want to, because it is cheaper. But what you don't realize is that over time, if we allow people to live in smaller apartments, then A, B, and C will happen. And the same is true with respect to having, cars that are not as safe enough, or medications that haven't been tested for 10 years or whatever. You might think that you want that, but we in the government, we know better, and we know that the short-term benefit is going to be outweighed by the long-term cost. So the shape of the argument is precisely the same. You're being paternalistic. You're saying those restaurant owners, they don't know what's good in the long term for society, right? I know what's good for society in the long term. Therefore, I'm going to limit their choices in order to shape society in a way that I think is better.
Okay, so my argument is, okay, there's an element of that in it, you're right. I don't disagree. I do think I know what's better for some people than most. Sometimes I'm wrong, but most of the time I'm right.
You do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that Gil knows better than most restaurants.
I agree, okay. So, anyways, that's why I will eventually have a successful business, and I will prove everyone wrong. But that there is the point I'm making is actually more that complex systems are so complex and so difficult to navigate that something that seems to be intuitively right doesn't necessarily hold true under other circumstances. So something that's intuitively easy to understand, cheaper labor is better for my bottom line, is actually bad over the long term for your overall business success, but you won't see it in the short term. And because we live in complex systems, it's very difficult to navigate this sort of environment. And the government creates complex systems with regulations. And the only way, they create complex systems that you can't as freely navigate because they put more and more burdens on your navigation skills. So right now, as the government currently exists, we're still coming back to the same issue. If you want to make the government smaller, you have to have enough of a cohesive society with enough agreed upon social norms where we all agree we can navigate a situation without government help. And right now we're not in that position because there's so many different entities that we need to communicate with, and we can't. We physically can't. They don't speak our language. And so long as you're in that position, you have to use force to navigate these scenarios. So in order to achieve both our goals, we both want as free an environment as possible. I'm just saying the only way to achieve that is to make culture more cohesive. The only way to do that is to stop immigration and to create incentives for assimilation. And in order to do that, you have to know what you're assimilating to. And in order for that to exist, we need to have standards and norms that liberals in their philosophy on life are against. We have to have standards and norms. There are no standards and norms. It's okay if you act in a certain way because everything is equal.
Right. I'll cut you here because we need to go fairly soon. But I would say very succinctly, your problem is not immigration. Your problem is Democrats.
I agree, but that helps Democrats.
That helps Democrats. I agree with that also. I'd just like to leave you on this note that we debate. I agree. Sorry, but you should agree that doing either of those things, it's much more difficult politically than getting rid of immigration.
I think it's a little more complex than that, but I partially agree. I think it's a lot easier to stop new immigration coming into the country than it is to change civil rights laws. However, getting rid of the immigrants that are already in the country, that is comparably difficult, if not more difficult, than, let's say, tightening rules about welfare, about the right of immigrants, or especially illegal immigrants, to receive welfare, for example. So I think it's more complex. I think there are low-hanging fruits in terms of tightening the net on immigrations illegally receiving benefits or even legally receiving benefits. I think I mentioned a while back that when I came into the UK almost exactly 20 years ago, my passport was stamped with ineligible for public funds or something like that, public assistance, something along those lines. So that, I think, is something that every immigrant opponent will gladly sign off on, right? So if you have the votes, if you have the political power to stop immigration, then you definitely have the political power to stop paying immigrants.
You have the political power. Go ahead, finish.
Sorry?
Go ahead, finish. Sorry.
Yeah, so stopping new immigrants from coming in, easy. Expelling existing immigrants, difficult. Stopping immigrants from getting public funds, politically easy. Stopping, unwinding anti-discrimination laws that obviously impact not just immigrants, but also races of Americans, much more difficult, I agree.
Okay, well, we can finish off on this consensus.
Then we're nearly done.
Yeah, let's finish off here. I have an issue with that as well, but we can discuss it maybe next time. Okay.
I'm sure we will.
Okay, it was great talking to you guys. I think that was a good conversation. I think I like these free flows of, rather than taking about any specific issues in the moment in the news cycle, maybe using them to open up a conversation, but being more free-flowing about it.
Absolutely.
Next week we'll
Hopefully.
run
I
one
mean,
talk.
nothing ever happens, so we'll see.
Yeah, Piss is about to break out. Bar and try to scrape around 50 shekels to get earphones because it will make a huge difference.
I'm willing.
Okay, I'll do
Okay,
my
so
best.
yes,
You
I was
can
gonna
always
say
send
I'm
me
willing
Bitcoin.
to buy you a microphone or headphones if necessary.
Okay. Thank you very
Okay,
much. We'll
accepted.
see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.